Hello and welcome to Fullerton College's Print 101 Intro to Print. Today we're going to talk about imposition and design, which is chapter 12 in your textbook. This is Professor Ben Kiewit. I'm going to start with a few warnings and caveats here at the beginning. I'm unlikely to win any Academy Awards for this video this time, so please bear with me. Many thanks to Professor Glenn Hirth for letting me borrow his slides for this one. As it turns out, I don't normally use slides to talk about this one. Normally, we do some hands-on paper folding together and talk about the parts of signatures in person. I will also be including links to other videos that I and other people have made about signatures, how they fold, and how to fold your own. Please play along at home and do fold some dummies. You'll probably have a good time. It's a very useful thing to get used to doing. The slides that Mr. Hirth had provided are in fact a very robust, very detailed set of notes that helps you through the entire chapter from the book. There's a chance I may not go through all of these slides with you in this video essay this time, as I intend myself to be more of a color commentary rather than a play-by-play. Also, other warnings, I'm recording outside due to nap times at home, and there is not only the coming winter storm, late winter, early spring storm that's about to hit, but the usual air traffic as I live near several airports. I'm not exactly complaining, just explaining there may be some noise in the background. I wouldn't be surprised if we had some barky dog too. Isn't that right, Teddy? Anyways, here we go. Without further ado, imposition and design. And I will attempt not to do strict PowerPoint karaoke, because nobody loves it when I do that. So we're going to talk about design and layout. So imposition, I will actually read this one to you. Imposition is the layout of various sizes and shapes of copy on a page in preparation for the production process. This used to be a department as a print shop. There used to be an imposition department. Like so many things in this world, it's now done by software instead. So pre-press now includes imposition, but imposition is no longer a task carried out by hand in most places. I'm sure there are some holdout shops that still do it the way that Grandpa did it. But on the whole, it's going to be done by software in a computer. Analog layout is done on something called a flat. And we're going to talk about this a bit because it's important to understand what a flat is, because that will help explain to you what the software you use nowadays is actually attempting to do. In the same way that understanding that Microsoft Word is meant to be a typewriter, once you understand imposition, layout, and I guess I'll come out and spoil the joke already, stripping, and you understand what paste up, it's a better name for stripping, is actually attempting to do, then InDesign will make more sense to you as well. So stripping is a physical assembly of images on a flat. This is talking about pre-computers, the type of printing world my father worked in when I was just a wee lad, actually barely at all, because pretty soon into my life, he was already working at Xerox, and we were already developing, the printing industry is already developing into a digital computer-centric model, the one that we're used to today. But prior to that, between the age of always producing things using lead type and hand set letters and even typed up linotype on giant typewriter machines that create molds that pour molten lead, a lot of preparation was done photographically. It's a photo analog system. So to create printing plates, you would create a layout using strips of film negatives or film positives, depending, of course, on what particular system you're using, oftentimes negatives, and you would use those negatives to expose a giant piece of film, or not film, sorry, you'd use the film to expose the printing plate that was light sensitive to create the hydrophilic and oleophilic, which is the hydrophobic parts of the plate. We'll talk more about those things when we get to the chapter on offset lithography. So offset litho plates for the longest time were produced using photographic methods. Stripping was a way of gluing together or taping together, depending on your particular shop's methods, the different pieces of artwork for exposure. There is a slight difference between paste up and stripping. And my dad was more into paste up than he was in stripping, but he stripped on the side sometimes. I tell you, these jokes don't get old. But anyways, So paste up is something you would do when you're producing something to be photographed, to make the film, to then strip the film and get it set up for actual table exposure. What happened to my thing? Let's go back over here. I'm so sorry. I don't know how that happened. So a stripper, here's a picture of them stripping. That's right. You joined my class to look at strippers. Isn't that great? So stripping on a light table. Light tables are necessary so you can see through the film negatives and understand what it is you're looking at. Otherwise, a film negative of text is a mostly black piece of film with very few little white letters, because the white letters will let the light through to cure those parts of the plate to be able to expose it properly. So you'd use a darkened room and use a light table so you'd be seeing through the film you were using. And you'd be using these goldenrod sheets, so called because they were goldenrod in color. Why goldenrod? Why, the same reason that, actually, I don't know if they're still out there. These are TV commercials I saw when I was a kid. Anybody remember blue blocker sunglasses? They're for night driving. Sunglasses for driving at night? That sounds silly. Well, it's not actually. You would wear these yellow amber colored glasses. To me, they always reminded me of X-Wing pilots because, you know, you got to fly the nerd flag. But those yellow golden UV resistant, I already spoiled it. The blue blockers block blue light and ultraviolet light to help your eyes not be as fatigued. So you can drive and stare at either night driving or a sun-baked road longer without hurting your eyes. In the same way, a goldenrod sheet is meant to be maximum UV opaque, so that as you expose the ultraviolet light table onto your printing plates, you don't get any extra light going through a white sheet of paper. Because sometimes you hold a white sheet of paper up to the light, you can still see light coming through it until it's very, very thick. But using a goldenrod sheet, it does a better job of curtailing the extra glow. That's why it's goldenrod. So you'd be trimming them down and then taping them into place. You can see in this picture here that the edges of the images are not super cleanly trimmed, and they have a lot, they're trimmed down as small as possible. The less area the film covers, the better, because the highest opacity you're going to get is that goldenrod sheet. So they're trying to not allow any extra light to sneak through, because extra light's going to make your image, when you expose that plate, not as good. So making the flat is just one part of pre-press. Pre-press is my specialty. Pre-press is what I have done in the print industry since I started. Pre-press is getting things ready to print. Pre-press involves checking the print job before it goes on press to make sure that all the errors and issues are figured out before you start. Very much in the same way that you don't just hop to an airplane, press the start button and take off. Oh no, that's the worst way to fly. You walk around the plane and you look for problems. You look for issues. You make sure the controls work, the engines work, the sensors work. You want to know what's wrong with it before you're 30,000 feet in the air hurtling along at Mach 2. In the same way, when we're setting up a print job, whether you're using an analog prep method or a digital file preparation, you really want to know what's going to happen before you start, because it's an expensive and, more importantly, a time-wasting problem to find out what's wrong with it mid-production, or even worse, after the fact. So here's a base sheet for a layout. You can see that they allow the different margins we may have talked a little bit about, and we will be talking more about. Margins are parts of the page that you're not allowed to use. You say, what? Part of the page I'm not allowed to use, but the press can print a certain sheet size. Well, yes, it can, except no, also it can't. There are parts that have to be accommodated. You have to allow for where the press grips the pieces of paper to pull them through. Kind of like Achilles' mother had to hold his heel while she dipped him in the river to make him invincible. And that heel did not get dipped because that's where her hand was holding. And that heel was his weak spot. In the same way, you cannot forever print the whole sheet of paper. You have to allow some spot for the mechanical conveyance of the paper through the machine. So you allow for the gripper margin. You also sometimes have to allow for the plate crimp margin. How much of that printing plate has to be bent over an edge and punched with holes and attached to a print cylinder? You have to allow for that. And then inside that, you have the amount of space you can actually use for the different sheets and pages you're going to print. A dummy is a very important thing, and there's a separate video I've included in this week's learning to help you see how to do this, and I really do hope that you try it at home. Folding dummies is the smartest thing you can do. A folding dummy is making a blank version of whatever it is you're going to produce. So you fold it the same way your signatures will be folded. It can be done for books and magazines and catalogs and big long, book type signatures are going to have multi-pages. It can be done for simple greeting cards and trifold brochures. I find that it is always helpful, even if it's not for you, even if you're one of those people who's done this enough that you can now close your eyes and picture which sheet goes where on a 16-page press sheet, which page goes on what part of the sheet facing which direction and in what order, so that it will fold and trim into the correct order of a book. I know a few people who can do that. They're amazing. I'm not one of them. I grew up with too much computer assistance, so I don't know it as well. But that's also why I will always fold a dummy. And even if it's not for you, like I was saying, even if you can do it, it's a helpful communications tool, so that the people working in the warehouse that are doing the actual folding for you later on, who may not be trained in printing the way you are, they're going to understand what's going on when they see the folding dummy. And sometimes it's useful to show a client what's going on so they understand what you're doing, because the worst thing you can have is a client who doesn't understand what you're doing. That non-understanding of what we do leads to a distrust when we tell them something goes wrong, and this feeling of being cheated. Think about how you feel when you send your car to a repair shop and they start telling you what's wrong with it, and you're not sure if you're being told honest truths or if they're just trying to upsell you. Anyways, a dummy is a very useful tool for yourself and for your clients. Here's a picture of some dummies. You can show different types of folds. A right angle fold folds perpendicular to the last fold. So if you fold the paper in half one way and then the other, those are right angle folds. Parallel folds fold the same way. Parallel folds are used for things like trifold brochures and gate folds. Right angle folds are used for things like French fold cards. I had to go for a cheap shot there because that's an easy one. That's just a single sheet folded twice, but also book signatures for making books, magazines, catalogs, etc. Control lines. Here is a press sheet. Actually, it's a flat. And you can see inside this flat, the flat is the size of the plate and the press sheet fits inside. And this shows you all the different sheets of paper, which direction you're going to face, where you can tape, where the tops of the pages are, where the bottoms of the pages are, what the numbers are, and where you put the different things. You can look at this at your leisure by pausing the video or by downloading the PowerPoint, which has been graciously provided by Professor Hirth. So layout is using a single sheet to produce multiple pages. That is called a signature. So layout is how we're going to set things up the way we set them up. If you want to make a book, you're going to use multiple pages, you're going to use a signature. Unless you're using loose leaf binding of some sort, like a three-ring binder or even spiral binding, sometimes you can get away with that for perfect binding. But if you're making any book or magazine that wants to be saddle stitched or case bound into a proper hardback textbook style book, you need to use signatures. A signature is a sheet of paper folded in such a way to have multiple pages on it. Here's a good diagram. Depending on how many times you fold it is how many sheets you get. A sheet of paper starts with 2 pages, front and back. Every time you fold it, you double the number of pages. Typically, you're going to be using 16-page signatures in life. Sometimes 32-page signatures are used, but the more times you fold, the less accurate the folds become and the more sloppy the book's going to be. So 32-page signatures are really only useful for those, check stand books you might buy at the grocery store in black and white that are paperback and kind of pocket sized and printed on newsprint. And you don't really care if the pages are perfectly aligned, so long as the entire story about espionage or romance or whatever other topic you can buy at a check stand is all going to be about. All right, we're going to stop here and I'll come back for a second video in just a moment.